Good evening. My name is Surya. I am part of Group 1 for Big Data Analytics taught by Dr. Alok Chaturvedi. And my team consists of Adarsh, Goel, Shan Lin, Prasad Vasant Gujela, Sherry, and Hongja Shi. So, the problem that we are going to solve today is New York City taxi data. So, one of the biggest problems in the taxi industry is that people don't know, like the taxi drivers don't know where they, like how long the next trip is going to take. They have a lot of variance or inconsistency on the length of the trips as well as the length of the trip as well as the distance of the trip, because most of the cab fares are dependent on the length it takes for the taxi ride as well as the distance they take. It's kind of hard for us to predict where the taxis should be for them to get high price fares and make a lot of money. So today, with the power of analytics, with the power of big data on Hive, we are going to solve that exact problem and help taxi firms make a better decision about where to place their taxis. For this particular project, we used 5 tools, namely Python APIs, the JSON and CSV and Twitter APIs, Hive, Tableau, and Excel. So our analytics workflow runs something along these lines, where we start off with the static data and we pre-process it, clean up the data set, and essentially where we disregard taxi locations which originate from California or from Canada. And then we start exploratory data analysis, where we look at how these trends are changing over time, and we run a EDA to identify the various clusters after that, so that we can categorize each taxi ride into its own pickups and drop-offs clusters. And then we connect this with a live data set, with the idea that this live data set's popularity is going to match with the static data set's demand popularity. Our original hypothesis was that once we connect these two, these are going to overlap in a way that the Twitter data, the tweets, is going to be an indicator for popularity of an event, which would be an indicator for a rise in taxi demand to that location in the city. So after that, we look at how true our hypothesis was, and we make a prediction about where taxi firms should be positioned for their next trip, and we make a recommendation for the taxi firm for future as well. So our geographic demand runs something along these lines. So it's pretty standard, and it's distributed all over Bronx and Manhattan. And since Manhattan is known for its office and high rises, and Bronx is known for its residential areas, it is expected that people are moving a lot from their homes to the offices, and is expected to show a lot of increase in the traffic in those regions. But we try to identify various clusters in these regions, and these are the clusters for pickups. And these are the popular regions where people are being picked up from, and we identified about 30 clusters using the k nearest neighbors clustering algorithm. After which we found out the centroids for each cluster, which we used further into our analysis. But before then, we also identified the drop-offs to identify which are the popular regions where people are being dropped off. And the rationale behind having 2 different clusters is to identify how which regions are popular for people getting off, and which regions are popular for people being picked up, and so that we can run a parallel analysis and try to see the affinity between 2 different regions of whether how many people are getting here, and if we can develop a model based on that to see if a person X was picked up here, what's the probability of him or her being dropped off in one of these other 30 locations. So here are the drop-off locations, the cluster centroids for the drop-off locations. And then we did a quick data analysis to see if day or the time of the day matters into this analysis. And as you can see, this it is pretty uniform on weekdays and on weekends. And in terms of the date time as well, we have similar graphs, which indicates that it might not be as significant into our clustering. It wouldn't make much of a difference into our clustering algorithm. After which we moved on to see how the traffic changed over different periods. And as you can see, there are very few locations which generate a lot of pickups. So few regions generate a lot of pickups, and likewise few regions generate a lot of drop-offs, which was kind of interesting. That we thought it was going to be uniformly distributed, which it is not, and we realized that these clusters are going to make a huge impact on our future data set. And now our problem becomes easier because we can suggest to put in one of these 5 locations versus put in across all the 30 locations. Now here's a heat map for each individual cluster, and we have this to show that on the x-axis, on the column wise you have pickups where people are being picked up, and on the row wise you have the drop off where people are being dropped off, and the darker the color is, the more number of people were picked up in that x column and dropped off in that y column. So we can see that there was some the most popular pickup drop off combination was that people were being picked up at Consulate General of Spain and dropped off at the Manhattan College, which was pretty interesting. And there were definitely some locations where there was no affinity between any of those two locations. Now we bring in the tweets dataset that we accumulated into our model, and now we have a New York Y. Like, these were generated data because the tweets, because of privacy reasons of the tweets and tweet APIs, we cannot get the actual location data for each tweet. But we generated this data, but we are confident with our analysis in that once we replace the two columns that represent the location, latitude and longitude of the tweet in our data set, with the actual data set, our analysis would show the new data. So our model would actually show the new data and is adaptable to the new data. So here we have a particular event, which is the Knicks versus Rockets, Texas Rockets game, and we analyzed the tweets for this particular event. This happens near Madison Square Garden, which is about the center of New York. And when we did affinity analysis, most of the tweets were coming from cluster number 20, which is this. So we tried to go back to our affinity heat map and try to identify what is that. So since people are going to Grand Central Station, most people are likely to come from Consulate General of Spain. And the next highest, Madison Square Garden, is because people are getting in and getting off of that. There's a high affinity within that. And then we have the Ramada, New York, which is the second highest of people getting in and getting off at Madison Square Garden. So these are some of the locations where we think we need to put our taxes to make most revenue dropping people off at Madison Square Garden. Now we try to look at top 5 locations so that we give taxi firms some freedom about where to position the taxis. And the top 5 locations, as explored in our heat map or affinity analysis, was Consulate General of Spain, Madison Square Garden, Ramada, New York, Socrates, Roosevelt Park, Wilson, Sonsini, Goodrich University. And the box plot given here simply indicates the time duration for each pickup and drop, each trip. And as you can see, the higher the time, the longer it takes, the more money people generate, the more money taxi companies generate. But since these box plots are pretty identical, we don't have a preference of one location over another, and it's up to the taxi firm to pick based on their own metrics or their own customizability. They have more freedom at picking up what they want. But an important thing that we could notice is that the passenger count increases as we go on. So there might be that we could create a new pricing algorithm where taxi firms can charge based on number of people that are in the cab, which Uber is currently doing, which taxi firms might need to adopt to modernize their revenue systems. With that, our recommendation, I'm going to summarize our recommendations, which is that they should place the taxis in this top 5 locations for the new Rockets versus Knicks games. And we could simply change the data set from Rockets versus Knicks games to a different event, and our analysis is going to be solid for the new event. And we can also reduce the idle time by creating a better match of supply and demand. We could generate more revenue by creating longer trip durations. And passengers will also be more likely to use Uber if they increase the customer satisfaction loyalty by creating these synergies between reducing wait times and increasing the passenger time, greater satisfaction. We can create a lot of customer satisfaction among our customers. And with that, I end our presentation and hope you enjoyed this. Thank you.